You love business studies, but it's a problem. Exams, they're hard. Writing an answer, that's hard too. So what I thought I'd do today is take you through the process that I use when I'm approaching an exam. Basically, it's a four-step process. First thing I do is I read all the questions, then I read the case study. After that, I construct a small plan of my answer, check that against the question, and then finally, I write my answer. Now that sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like it's going to take a lot of time, and I know students worry about that in an exam. But the truth is, it's a worthy investment, something that you should all know something about. So I'm going to take a look at what I do for a level 1 exam and then a level 3 exam, and we'll see how it goes. So this is from the level 1 examination from 2018. It's Achievement Standard 90837 or 1.1. The first thing I'm going to do when I sort of look at this examination is I am going to look at the questions. Now, if I scroll down and look at this, you can see that at question 1, it actually tells me in many of the level 1 exams what topics are being examined. So that makes my life a little bit easier. I can see here that the first question is going to be on ownership structures. And if I want a little bit more information, I can take a quick look down here. I'm going to have to define what a sole trader is. I'm going to have to give an advantage and a disadvantage of being a sole trader. Now, if I keep going, you can see that I'm going to have to look at changing from a sole trader to a registered company. I'm going to have to explain one difference between a sole trader and a registered company. And I'm going to have to look at how that impacts Sally as the owner in this situation. So already I've got a good idea. Okay, I'm going to have to talk about ownership structures, specifically sole traders and registered companies. For the second question, it's about business objectives and success. I'm going to have to define what those are and identify one for Avocado Smash. I'm also going to have to fully explain why that objective might be important, why it matters to them. Then on those objectives and success kind of questions, I'm going to have to look at a business that I've studied in class in depth, look at an objective for them, and explain how they had to improve business operation to achieve the objective, and how that improved the success of the business. Alright, so I already know I'm going to have to look at ownership structures and business objectives and success. Finally, I'm going to have to look at business documents and communication. You can see for this part, I'm going to have to identify a financial document that they should keep. I'm going to have to look at why that document might be important when dealing with customers who have paid online. Then I'm going to have to describe some things about communication, in fact, how enabling communication would be effective for Avocado Smash, and then why they would use two-way communication with customers. So I spent maybe at this point about a minute and a half, possibly even 2 minutes of the allotted 3 hours, and I know already everything that I'm going to face, everything I'm going to have to answer in this exam. So it's a really effective use of my time to take those few minutes and figure that out. So I've looked at the questions. Now I'm actually going to sort of like start looking at them individually. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the case, because I've been reading about Avocado Smash and I kind of want to know what their deal is, what's going on with them. And I'm going to sort of highlight bits in here as I go. And I can find out that Sally, well, she's the owner. I know it's a sole trader. I know the business grows avocados organically, and that's on Sally's property. I also can see that they sell these to local restaurants. And so I've looked at the case there. I've looked at the questions, look at the case. Now I can start to do what I think is probably the most crucial part. This is the part that separates students that are able to have good answers, not repeat themselves, really know what they're doing, and students who, let's say, muck it up. And there's no substitute for it. I'm going to plan my answer out. Now you're given lots of space in your exam paper. You're allowed to write pretty much all over it. This part here assesses use only. Stick away from that, but everywhere else is fair game. So I tend to use the space sort of like up above questions along the side here to plan out my answers before I start, so that I know that I'm going to stay on topic and that I'm not going to repeat myself. So let's have a go. I've got to define the business term sole trader. Okay, well, what do I remember from my studies? I know that a sole trader has one owner, and I know that it has unlimited liability. So I'm going to jot that down. Then I've got to fully explain one advantage of Avocado Smash operating as a sole trader. All right, so I'm going to use a BRT structure for that, and feel free to look at my fully explaining video if you don't know about that. Well, I remember one advantage is that it's simple to form. Now I've got to think about, well, why or how is that an advantage? Well, it being simple to form is an advantage because it means that Sally can get on with setting up and growing her avocados. And what effects is that going to have? Well, that's going to lead to Sally being able to start selling her avocado sooner. Therefore, she can start covering the costs and start to make a profit. So that's one advantage fully explained. Now I've got to fully explain one disadvantage. Okay, well, I remember that a sole trader has unlimited liability, so that's a disadvantage. Why is that a disadvantage? Well, it's a disadvantage because it means that Sally might be liable for business debts. That could lead to her personal assets being seized in order to pay those debts. Therefore, it might be more difficult for her to run her business if she, for example, doesn't have a car to get to work. Or I might say, therefore, it's going to affect her quality of life or something like that. So you can see now that I have a good idea of the exam because I've looked at the questions. I know about the case study and I planned out this answer. And that's taken me maybe a grand total of 5 minutes. Maybe only 3 of those minutes spent planning out the answer. Now it's going to be very quick for me to actually write out the answer and then move on to the next one. Really good system to keep me on track, make sure I don't repeat myself, all that stuff. Here is a paper from the Level 3 examination from 2018. It's 91379, otherwise known as Achievement Standard 3.1. So when I open this for the first time, I'm going to look through the questions first to try to get an idea of what I'm going to be up against in this exam. So if I scroll down, you can see that for the first question here, or the first part of the question, I'm going to have to fully explain the importance of introducing innovations to its production process. Specifically, the reason that the process innovation would affect the cost of production and the impact on competitors. Okay, so I'm going to have to talk about innovation. Then I can see that I'm going to have to talk about intellectual property. Specifically, I'm going to have to look at if they should invest in it to prevent competitors from copying innovations. So I'm going to have to say, hey, which innovation is happening here? The reason for my choice of IP protection. So am I going to choose a trademark, a patent, copyright? I'm assuming it's asking me about there. And then I'm going to talk about the impact that this form of protection would have on sales. Okay, so I'm going to talk about innovation, specifically process innovation, and I'm going to have to talk about intellectual property. What else can I glean? Well, in C, I'm going to have to look at change management. I'm looking at a top-down approach to ensure that staff are on board with product innovations, but to fully explain one positive and one negative effect of the top-down change. And I'm going to have to provide a justified conclusion about whether that's going to be successful or not. And then finally, for D, I'm going to have to look at a business I've studied in class. And that looks like it's about quality management. I'm going to have to fully explain one positive and one negative effect of the quality management strategy that I've chosen, and then a justified conclusion about whether that's suitable for the business or not. So looking through that's probably taken me about 1 to 2 minutes, and already I have a really good idea of what's coming for me in this exam, what I'm going to need to know about. I'm going to have to know about innovation, intellectual property rights, change management, and quality, pretty much all parts of the topics that are in 3.1. So once I've done that, I've got a good idea of what's going on. I actually want to get an idea of the case study. I've seen some things about Waitini Enterprises. So the next thing for me is to find out what is going on for them. What's the deal? And that's going to help me later on when I'm looking at Justify stuff. What do they care about at the moment? So as I'm reading this, I might highlight things that I think might stand out as useful for me. It says, well, the mission of Waitani Enterprise we know is to make space affordable. Okay, great. They're selling and producing rockets. I know that they produce stuff at different locations. I also know they have talented and loyal staff who are encouraged to be involved in the innovations by the CEO. And I know that one process innovation that they have is a specialist 3D printer, which means they're faster and have less quality issues. Okay, so there's a bunch of important things in there that I might use my answers. Once I've kind of like read that and highlighted some things, I'm going to start answering questions. Let's have a look at a justify level question. And there's no getting around it. What students that are good do, students that don't repeat themselves, students that have a good idea of what's going on and get fully explained marks and justified marks, they plan. And if you look at your exam paper, you'll notice that there's only one part of the examination paper you're not allowed to write on, and that's this part here, assessor's use only. So the assessor can only write in there, but everywhere else is fair game. So I will often use the space up the top of my paper or down the left side to plan out my answer. And that's what we're going to do here. Firstly, I'm going to read the case. Well, Waitani Enterprises is keen to introduce some other product innovations that will significantly improve the performance of the rockets. Okay, so we're looking at innovation. The CEO, though, that person's concerned about the speed at which some of their competitors are already innovating. Okay, so we're concerned about competitors and how quickly they're innovating. Waitani Enterprises will need to innovate quickly, and the CEO is considering two alternate approaches to managing this change process to ensure staff are on board. So they can do an inclusive process. That's going to get input from all parties, from all sort of staff in the business, but it may involve some long meetings, or a top-down process. The change process is only decided on by the managers, which is going to mean no long meetings. Okay, some important info in there. So I've got to evaluate the likely success of a top-down approach, fully explain one positive, one negative effect of the top-down, and then do a justified conclusion. So I'm going to do this part by part, break it down, and plan out some stuff using that space that I've got. So I'm going to start with this one positive of the top-down approach that I've got to fully explain. And I might think to myself, well, one positive of this top-down approach is that there are going to be no long meetings. That's going to be an advantage because it reduces the timeline for that change management process to happen, making it quicker. What effects is that going to lead to? Well, it's going to lead to Waitani Enterprises being able to produce product innovations before their competitors do. Therefore, they can secure market share and profitability. Then I might quickly jot out a quick plan for the negative effect as well. Well, negative effect of this top-down approach is that there is no staff input. That's going to be a negative effect because only managers' ideas will be involved in that change process, and potentially that's going to make those ideas less efficient or not as innovative or not as good. What effects? Well, that's going to lead to potential issues in those innovations. Therefore, competitors might take some of Waitani Enterprises' market share with their higher quality products. Okay, cool. So planned out one positive and one negative effect. Now I've got to do the hard part. Got to do the justify. Now remember that justify requires new information, so stuff we haven't used before, and it's got to be relevant to this business. It's got to be something that this business kind of cares about at the moment, or something we know about this business. And take a look at my justify video if you can't remember how to do that. So for my justify, I've got to talk about the likelihood of the success of the top-down change management approach. I can go either way with this. In fact, if you look at the assessment schedule, see that I'm going to go the opposite way of what they did. So I'm going to say, well, it's likely not to be as successful as maybe the inclusive approach. It's not going to be as successful because of those talented staff. I'm using information here. I'm using information from all the way back here. Here it said they have a very talented and loyal staff. I'm going to use that information in this question.
So it's not going to be very successful because those talented staff, they might not feel very valued. They're going to feel undervalued. And because they feel undervalued, that is going to reduce their productivity. And if their productivity is reduced, that's going to sort of offset or eliminate any sort of increased inefficiency by not having these long meetings. In the long run, they're actually going to have this problem because these employees might continue to feel undervalued. And that means that they're going to be sort of behind their competitors consistently. So it's not a very good idea for them to do it this way.
And there you have it. Read the question, read the case, plan out your answer, check it against the question to make sure it's accurate and answers what's asked, and then finally write that answer out. I promise you it is a worthy investment. It's worth using your time in the exam to do this. It'll stop you going off track, it'll stop you repeating yourself, it'll help you fully explain and justify your answers. So hopefully that's something that you can use and will help you do better in the exam. So, good luck.